last 14 years, I have developed relationships with many fertility clinics, and I've had my team provide real-time feedback to those clinics to ensure that all of our clients are receiving the most amazing care throughout their process. And so over this time period, I've learned a lot myself in terms of, what we feel makes a good clinic, what are best practices, that, most expensive isn't always best, cheapest isn't always best, but what we do know is best is that clinics who have an infrastructure to support their patients. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a moment. So if you are joining this webinar and you are researching working with an egg donor, a surrogate, or you're researching IVF or fertility treatments for yourself, all of this information will be necessary for you in selecting the clinic that you work with. So the first piece and the first question I get is, what is the success rate of XYZ clinic that I'm looking into? And the difficulty with success rates, especially here in Canada, are this: there are no governing bodies that necessarily require a clinic to record day one of a cycle as a cycle. And so oftentimes, the data that is reported is or can be skewed. And so the reason I sort of bring that up initially is because people are very aware of, organizational bodies in the US, such as SART or CDC, who list, goes in and lists all the data from all of the clinics to provide, fairly in real time data on success rates with egg donor, gestational carrier, regular IVF cycles. But with that, and what we see in the US is that often clinics, will primarily work with gestational surrogacy or primarily work with egg donors. And so their success rates report quite high. And so in Canada, where there isn't the CDC or SART, and clinics are just sort of, providing their own, statistics, I always suggest, if you're working with a surrogacy agency or an egg donor program, to ask them, what are your success rates in this particular clinic? Because they have no buy-in. They can give, statistics on cycles that would match what you are moving through. So whether it's a traditional IVF cycle, whether it's an IVF cycle with an egg donor or a gestational carrier, and that's really where I see the value of working with an agency, or one of the ways in which I see that. As I said, whether it's a surrogacy agency, an egg donor agency, or even someone similar like Fertility Advisors that we run, but a program that really looks through data and understands how to extrapolate that data, understands how to refer you to a clinic that best suits your needs. Because statistics are one thing, but this is such a human process. And if you are 41 years of age and wanting to use your own eggs, you single-handedly can make a success rate at a clinic much lower. But for you to have success or closure is so important that we need to find a clinic who works with many intended mothers that are over age 40 using their own eggs, so that you can get the best success rate given your situation, given what it is you are looking to achieve. Because we have clinics, across the country, nationally, throughout the US, that, work specifically with older intended mothers, or work with those who are, same-sex male couples, or those who are, going to use an egg donor and do the treatments on themselves and prepare for an embryo transfer. And so for us, finding a clinic that has extensive experience in whatever brings you to fertility clinic is important for us. And so with that, the questions that we ask fertility clinics when we are investigating or interested in partnering with them, or we would suggest that you ask if you are interested in in partnering with a clinic. So first and foremost, who is the doctor at this clinic that you're interested in working with? Do you have access to that doctor? So many clinics are physician owned. And so there will be this doctor who's all over the internet, who's amazing, who has these great success rates. And you call the clinic and you ask for an appointment. And you go in expecting to see this doctor, yet you end up seeing a student, or you end up seeing, a new physician who is lovely, but not the doctor you wanted to work with. And so we always suggest, if you are interested in working with a specific doctor at a specific clinic, when you call that clinic, let the secretary know, I'm looking to become a patient of this doctor. And if they aren't able to because that doctor is full, thank them for their time, ask them to contact you if and when that doctor becomes available. And when we suggest that people do that, we find that they are referred quite quickly to that physician, and that they really are just trying to build the repertoire or business of a younger doctor. Making that phone call or working with an agency who can make that phone call for you and get you in with the doctor of your choice, really important. Does the fertility clinic that you're interested in have the infrastructure to support your surrogate or your egg donor? We know success happens with duplication, with practice, with trial and error. And so we want to ensure that you are not at the beginning of that trial and error, but you're at the end of it. So you're working with a clinic who has a great deal of experience working with, gestational carriers, working with egg donors, working with people within your situation that brings you to the fertility clinic, whatever that is. And so asking the clinic, do you have a third-party program manager? Do you have a third-party program? Asking the clinic, do they have good working relationships with agencies? Do they have good working relationships with surrogates? What is their criteria? And it's important to know about criteria for this reason. If you are looking to move through IVF and you have your sister wanting to be your egg donor, and she's 38 and she had a baby last year, and you would imagine that she's very healthy and lovely, but finding out, will this clinic work with your 38-year-old sister, or are they concerned that that will bring their statistics down? What would be the chances of your 38-year-old sister participating in this process and you having success? So whatever your specifics are, to really talk about those specifics early on, so that you don't invest with a physician who may not be able to help you, or may not be interested in helping you, or who may not have experience helping someone in your situation. So what are your criteria in terms of, surrogates or egg donors or intended parents? If you live in a different community, how can they support you with outside monitoring, whether that's blood work or ultrasounds, or can you Skype for your first appointment? When we look at clinics, we often look at best practices. Us, as an agency, we are really always working with clinics on best practice. And so for us, best practice is screening a surrogate in person, having the doctor meet your surrogate, having the doctor meet your egg donor, having them educate the donor or surrogate about the entire process, having that surrogate or donor meeting with a therapist to talk through any feelings that they are going through, ensuring that they are understanding of the process, and ensuring that they are able to commit to the process is so important. And we found years ago that clinics would screen the parties in their community, and they would only meet them for the egg retrieval or the embryo transfer. And we found that numbers of surrogates and donors were dropping out of the program even before that next step, even before the embryo transfer or egg retrieval. And we couldn't figure out what that was. And when we decided to move to everyone gets screened in person, meet the doctor, ask the questions of the therapist, we saw that really diminish, because we saw that it was a matter of donors and surrogates getting the information they needed in order to not only commit to the clinic, but also to commit to you as intended parents. And so it's very important that as you're talking to fertility clinics, if you're interviewing them, what does your screening process look like for surrogates? What does your screening process look like for donors? If you're entering into a guaranteed program, which is so popular, it almost seems that everyone I speak to is entering into a guaranteed program. And a guaranteed program is essentially a program in which intended parents pay 2 to 2.5 times the IVF costs in order to have a guarantee of a live birth. And so, balance that up against the clinic's success rates and then decide. And then look at what led you to fertility treatments and weigh that out. So if I'm paying 2.5 times, but they're getting people pregnant 80% of the time, does that make sense for me? If I've had nothing but bad luck and I just need a guarantee because I can't, keep going back to my mortgage or keep going back to the lender or keep going back to my parents, then a guarantee program often makes sense for people. And so talking through, the guaranteed program, reviewing the documentation about a guaranteed program with either your fertility lawyer or, or someone who can help you read through it and really understand what it is you're committing to, because it's a great deal of money, and you want to ensure that, the worst thing that could happen is that you get pregnant the first time and have paid, for 2 IVF cycles, but have a baby on the way. And so really, really looking into these guaranteed programs, which makes sense for many reasons. And so talking to your clinic about cost. Does your clinic take your insurance card for the medication that either your egg donor or surrogate are going to be using? Or does the receipt come in your name so that you can then submit the receipt for medications that your surrogate or donor will take? Does the clinic provide a receipt in your name for your insurance to cover the IVF process? What upsells does your clinic have? Are they going to suggest that you have PGTA or genetic testing done on your embryos? And what does that cost look like? And getting all of that information up front, because I'm telling you, I speak to intended parents every day who say, I walked into a clinic and I didn't even realize what I had committed to. So being an informed consumer, ensuring that you know what the costs are before you leave that first appointment, so you can make a decision that works for you, works for your budget, that you really, really understand. And then from there, are you assigned a nurse who's going to manage your process? This is not an insured service. It is so important that throughout this entire process, you are in control. You are asking the questions. And if you don't know what those questions are, talk to your surrogacy agency, talk to your egg donor agency, find out what questions you should be asking throughout the entire process, whether it's through your donor taking medication and how many follicles were there on day 7 versus how many follicles were there on day 10. How are my embryos developing? How is my surrogate's lining check? There are many questions that you will need to ask to ensure that you are in the driver's seat and that you are in control as you move through this process. And so working with people who can give you those word tracks in order to advocate for yourself at the clinic and ensure that you understand everything going forward, and that you understand from a financial perspective and from a medical perspective what it is you are engaging in, whether it's in Canada, the US, or abroad. We work with clinics, as I said, across Canada, the US, as well as clinics overseas. And so we want to ensure that as you go through the process, you truly understand, what it is you are, or who it is even that you are engaging with. I really don't have much more information than that. This is a very short webinar, but I wanted to, just provide some information and then open it up to questions. Jordan, does anyone have any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, we have one question here. We invite anyone else who has any questions at this time to please send them through the questions tab or the chat tab. So we have one person here wondering what you think of the Fertility Center in Las Vegas.
I think the Fertility Center in Las Vegas is fantastic. I think that they have packages available to intended parents that not only offer guarantees, but offer unlimited transfers. There are amazing egg donors in the state of Nevada, and we've had many intended parents, use that clinic and have had great success. And if it's a clinic you may be interested in, we're happy to make that referral for you.
Okay, wonderful. Another one just came in here from Clement. They were wondering, what are the major differences between clinics in the US and Canada?
So when we look at clinics that are located anywhere in the world, we are always looking for how to best manage the process. And so, when looking at US clinics, often clinics in the US are able to just specialize in surrogacy and egg donation. And so when we look at clinics in Canada, they are often doing fertility preservation for cancer patients, as well. Many clinics are doing funded cycles if fertility treatments are part of the social health care in that province. And so when we look at the differences, we often see that US clinics are able to move forward with people more quickly, and that they're able to to provide a different type of patient care. However, we have now found, recently that Canadian clinics are really upping their game and becoming more involved in patient care, and understanding that, that yes, surrogates want often to remain in Canada and in their communities, and so they are working really diligently to, up their game to really be equivalent to US clinics. In terms of success rates, we are seeing Canadian clinics create criteria similar to those in the US, because initially and for many years that was the difference, is that US clinics had stricter criteria for surrogates and for egg donors participating in their programs. And we're finding that Canadian clinics as well, especially with guaranteed programs, are having similar criteria requirements, which then are creating equivalent success rates.
Wonderful. We have another question here from Jonas. They are wondering if we have any other assistance programs aside of MHB.
MHB. Men having babies, yes. So for many intended parents who are looking for financial assistance, throughout the process, while we no longer work with men having babies, because for us, we decided to use our marketing dollars to educate and empower and find surrogates. But we still honor the MHB commitment that we made a couple of years ago. And so, we still provide MHB discounts. And as well, we find that the fertility clinics that we partner with do as well. However, I don't know of any other programs similar to MHB. But I would love, if you want to send me an email, I'd love to talk through with you how to negotiate the best rates at a fertility clinic, and to see if I can help you in any way with the unfortunately huge financial costs of this process.
Amazing. All right, we've got a few people saying thank you for the answers. We have one last question here. They would like to know why we work with Create Fertility and what are their advantages?
Sure. So we work with fertility clinics across Canada. You know, many of our clients are working with Create, and the reason that I myself, as a CEO of Canadian Fertility Consulting, supports Create in the way that I do is really simple. They have the infrastructure I spoke about. They have a dedicated third-party program. They have counseling available in-house. So if your surrogate were to attend an appointment and to receive bad news, or if you were, there would be a counselor on site that could speak to you immediately. As well, we have found that Create Fertility has their own PGTA lab, and so they're not shipping embryos out they're not shipping out, it's not the embryo, but they're not shipping the cells out to have PGTA done. They're able to do it in-house. As well, we have found them to be the clinic that has the highest success rates in Canada. And so we found them to be fantastic to work with. They also have a guaranteed program that for many people makes a great deal of sense. However, as I said at the beginning, I work with lots of clinics, but in Canada, we have found that Create really has been the best option for our clients.
Great. That is all of the questions we have today.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions or you want to talk through selecting a clinic, or if you're already at a clinic and you're wanting to manage the process, I have emails ready for you to send to your clinic to ask the questions about the donor at specific times, or your surrogate, to really ensure that you are project managing this beautiful and amazing project of your life. So please reach out. I would love to provide you with that information so that you can move forward in this process, educated and empowered, ensuring that you are advocating for yourselves and able to get the best possible success rates. And I wish you all the best of luck for those of you who aren't pregnant yet. And yeah, we'll talk to you next week on our next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.